Hello, everyone. I'm Wilson. I'm the founder of Covy, and welcome to episode 1 of Brands and Growth with Covy. In this podcast, we'll be exploring one question that I get asked quite often by clients and professionals. Is starting a podcast actually worth it in 2026? Over the years, I've had consultants, founders, business owners, creators, professionals ask me different questions about podcasting, whether they should start one, who podcasting is really for, whether to begin with audio or video, what platform to use, and how to choose topics, and whether the industry is already saturated. So rather than answering these questions individually every time, I thought it would be valuable to bring them together into one episode, the first episode of Brands and Growth with Covy. So in this episode, I'll be answering some questions, some of the most common questions my clients have asked about podcasting, while sharing practical insight, industry data, and my own personal experience helping professionals use content to build authority, grow their brands, and generate business opportunities. So if you'll be thinking about starting a podcast or you're trying to determine whether it's the right move for you, this episode should give you a clear framework for making that decision. So let's get started. So the first question, who should even be thinking about starting a podcast? Ideally, professionals and consultants, people with deep career experience or industry knowledge. They form one of the first set of individuals who should usually think about starting a podcast. Then we have individuals with strong passion for a topic. So you don't have to be a professional consultant. You have a passion for something. It might be a hobby. It might be just anything irregular or regular that you are actually passionate about. Yes, you can start the podcast around that topic. For example, Marvel comics, and you have to define in things like beers, basically anything. So as long as you are passionate, this will help you be consistent and you wouldn't be bored. And a third set of individuals who should consider starting a podcast are people who already have hosting experience. Now, this is important because a couple of people have built experience hosting, which is a key aspect of podcasting. So when you think about Stephen Bartlett, Jay Shetty, and some of these top guys, you would notice that they are amazing hosts. If you have that experience, you are able to bring just about anybody onto your podcast to discuss whatever you want to. Joe Rogan, for example, he has vast experience. He had vast experience hosting so many things before he started this podcast. So he's able to cut across so many different topic areas and industries. So if you have a great hosting experience, you can always start a podcast. It's usually the most common. Now, interest alone is not enough, which is the key thing. So the point here is this: irrespective whether you fall into any of this group or not, all of it doesn't matter. The one singular factor that determines whether or not you should start a podcast is, can you persist? How long can you go building your podcast before you quit? And I have a benchmark for that. Can you produce 100 episodes of your podcast in the shortest period of time, say within 6 months to 1 year, consistently without stopping, whether or not you have views, whether or not you get popular, whether or not people watch that podcast? That is the most important question you should ask yourself before you decide whether or not you should start a podcast. Now, the question is why 100 episode matters. Number one, consistency is the real barrier, not starting. Anybody can start a podcast. There are 1,000 YouTube videos online that will teach you how to start a podcast in, say, less than 10 minutes. But consistency is what differentiates successful podcasters from unsuccessful podcasters. Statistically, but around 4.5 million podcasts exist, but only 350,000 are consistent. That is less than 10% active. Then 47% of podcasters quit after just 3 episodes. So starting doesn't make you unique. Why 10% reach 10 episodes? Why less than that actually gets to 20 episodes? And even at 20 episodes, you cannot counting your eggs. In fact, you are not even close to success yet for the vast majority. So in other words, starting doesn't make you unique. It is how long can you remain. But like I said, the benchmark is between 6 months to 12 months. So again, start the podcast, you know you can consistently output 100 episodes between 6 months to 12 months. Why? The reason is quite simple. Number one, if you are just starting a podcast, you are green. irrespective of whatever level you start from. Say you're a professional. Yeah, the fact that you are a professional, a consultant, a lawyer that has been doing this for thousands of years does not mean you will be successful. And so the entire ecosystem of podcasting requires you to go through a learning curve. So 6 to 12 months, 100 episodes will give you fast learning through data. You understand what topics works, you see what audience responds to, and you're able to refine your structure and format quickly. Second, you have guest and content clarity improves. Yes, you learn the best guest types, especially if you intend hosting. This is a solo podcast, and it will be for a very long time before I start inviting people. Then skill development also accelerates. Podcasting improves through doing and not planning. Speaking, interviewing, delivery, they all improve quickly. Now, why most podcasts fail, it's not just numbers, it's the skill development and everything that I talked about. Most people stop before they build the required skill. Most people stop before they reach the right audience. The first 100 episodes are what build the real podcaster. So 100 episode commitment creates mastery. You will improve faster than 99% of podcasters. So because repetition builds skill, clarity, audience, and understanding all together. Now, the next question I have here is the best podcast to study as a beginner. Yes, it's very important that when you want to start any venture, whether podcast or YouTube or whatever social media, you study the best. So, who are the best podcasters or podcasts that I should study? Now, this is where you have to be careful. You must avoid the trap. I call it the top 10 trap, which is usually the most popular podcasts, top 10 in your industry or generally. Why? Because now these guys, they represent success, but they do not represent the full ecosystem. I'll tell you why. Because top podcasts have millions of views, but there are also thousands of podcasts that have hundreds of thousands of views, even 10,000 or even 100 views. But every level is a part of the system, which is why you cannot define success just by the numbers. You only define the success of a podcast by the goal of the podcaster. Why was the podcast launched in the first place? That means a podcast that talks about bees with just maybe 10,000 views might be doing well based on their target. Podcast that is created purely to clients and is hitting the number of clients it wants to get is doing better. But if you focus on the top 10, you will most likely just be looking at numbers. A purpose-driven podcast matter. Some exist for education or social impact. They don't chase numbers, but create deep real-world value. So the best strategy for you, if you are looking for podcasts that you can study, is to do what? Do not copy the biggest podcast directly. Study only podcasts that directly align with your own goal or niche. That's simple. Alignment will reduce confusion and pressure. Yes, alignment will prevent unrealistic expectations and to keep strategy focused and consistent. The third question, the best platform to choose for your podcast. Of course, ordinarily, everybody will say Spotify and most of others, Apple, you understand. Now, personally, I think that the best platform for a beginner who wants to start podcasting today is YouTube, through and through. YouTube is the biggest podcast platform today for two reasons. Number one, video distribution. Number two, people do not need to search for you. So start with YouTube and stay on YouTube for as long as you can. In fact, I'll say stay on YouTube for the first 100 videos. All your attention should be on YouTube. There you are able to go, there you're able to hone your skill. You must understand that big podcasters like Joe Rogan and Diary of a CEO, they all grew through YouTube video podcasting early on, before YouTube even became fully optimized for podcasting. A second reason why you should really focus on just YouTube at first is because of SEO advantage. A well-structured podcast becomes searchable. It shows up in YouTube search. It also shows up in Google search results. One episode has multiple discovery channels. You don't get that on Spotify. You do not get that on Spotify. Then also simplicity. It's easy to just upload and of course do what you want to do. So again, I would always put YouTube above every other podcast platform, especially for beginners. Now, a second question, how to choose a podcast topic. Now, there are two rules. First, every podcast topic must reflect the audience pain points or needs. Then secondly, it must be phrased the way the audience speaks. Again, it must reflect the pain points. The titling as well as the subtitling must reflect the pain point, the desire of the audience. And secondly, it must be phrased in the way your audience speaks. Topics, generally, where do you get them from? Can be from your lived experience, from your shared pain points with your audience, and from watching other podcasts. But ideas are usually not enough. So this is important. They must be validated. Now, these 2 points I talked about is built on this foundation that topics must be validated. So how do you validate it? Simple, through research processes. You use tools like SEMrush, TubeBuddy, Answer the Public, Google Keyword, and YouTube search bar. These tools will give you the real audience questions. You want to start a podcast on poultry. Of course, if you have been a poultry farmer for a long time, you definitely have the pain points. You definitely, to a large extent, more than any other person, you understand how that industry is. But you don't just pick a topic based on that, and then just go ahead and create a podcast episode on it. So you pick that topic, then you plug it into these tools. These tools will then give you enough information, questions, how the audience are asking the questions, the exact phrasing they are using, search volume and demand, and the competition data. All of these are important in how you then craft out your topic and the subtopics for that particular podcast episode. Now, topics are not just created, again, they are discovered, they are tested, and they are refined through data. The fourth question, why is podcasting worth it? So, the final question for this podcast session, my first podcast session, let's go into it. Why is podcasting worth it? Why? Now, to understand this, you must understand a basic principle. Video content creation, as it were now, broadly can be classified under 4 categories. Number 1, shorts and reels. These are short videos, usually less than 3 minutes, that are dominant in Instagram, TikTok, and also you have some of them on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is optimizing for that. Then secondly, you have long form videos are unique to YouTube, primarily YouTube. The long form YouTube is usually between 10 to say 30 minutes, say between 5 to 30 minutes. There are long form YouTube content that are above 1 hour, but they are not frequent. And the last are now podcast video content. Video podcasts can last for as long as 2 hours, some 3 hours. The average, let's say 1 hour, 30 minutes. Then the final one are streaming. Yes, streaming is also key. Now, the good thing about streaming is that it can last 24 hours for as long as you want. But now, this is the key, which is why podcasting is important. The longer video content form, the higher the chances of you achieving every single reason why people create content: awareness, to convert claims, to build an audience. Whatever reason why people create content, you achieve your goals. In other words, your reels are shorter, and so you need a whole lot more to achieve your goals. Long form content creators, they reach a higher level of authority, they reach a higher level of fame, they reach a higher level of influence faster than Instagram stars. Then the next is podcast. But before I talk about podcast, let's go to streaming. Streaming, as it were, the craziest. Today, we have people like Speed, and most of them who are global stars as a result of primarily streaming. Why? Because video content that runs for hours live on end. In fact, think about the brand Kim Kardashian. They built the entire brand simply on long form video content back then. So my point is this: whether you're a professional, whether you're a consultant, whatever it is you do, the best chance you have to reach your goal through content creation is to go for long form video content. Now, professionals and consultants are not heavy with streaming, but when it comes to all 4, podcasting is the best. So you would gain more eventually creating podcasts episodes 1 hour, 2 hours, irrespective. You can even start at 30 minutes and achieve your goals quicker and faster than if you focus on just Instagram reels and shorts, or TikTok reels and shorts, or if you focus on just YouTube long form video, which is why everything that I've said is all synced together. Start first on YouTube video podcasts. and then move to the other platform. Podcast session is uploaded. It exists both as a long form, very long form video content. It also exists as a well optimized content that can always show up on search engine as well as on AI search bots like ChatGPT and Claude. Starting a podcast is a very sound business proposition. Whatever you want to do, business, awareness, whatever purpose you want to achieve online, as long as it's online and it is related to content creation, podcast is still your best option. The last question is the podcast industry saturated? Of course not, it's not saturated. This will be the one reason why many people are not starting podcast, because it looks like everybody has a camera and sets up like and start up. It's not saturated. It listed out some data at the beginning where I said we have over 4 million podcasts and only 300 and something are constantly updating, which is less than 10%. So to make it worse, I also mentioned how most stop producing content after 3 episodes, and the large portion stop after 10 episodes. So the entrance is wide, but if you can persist beyond 10 videos, you have joined a very, very set of people. If you are able to consistently produce content, especially in a short period of time, you're able to consistently publish episodes in short period of time, you are in the top 1%. You are in the top percent of those who are in the 300 and something thousand or so are consistent. So it is not saturated. It is only saturated at the bottom. But trust me, many you start with today will feel they will not continue. So yes, podcast is completely worth it today. The industry is just there about $39 billion as the estimates right now. And this is a potential $1 trillion industry. Yeah, the podcast industry is a potential $1 trillion industry. Look at the journey of individuals. Stephen, but like I said, these guys, they are the top. They do not represent the truth of the entire ecosystem. There are podcasts that are turning in a whole lot of profits and a whole lot of hitting their goals in so many ways. So yes, it is not saturated. The best time to start was years ago. Now the second best time to start a podcast is today, which is very, very important. So these 4 questions answered. So is podcast today worth it? Yes, you should start today. However, remember, when you start, your goal is to get 100 podcast episodes in less than 6 months, at most 1 year. And I am certain that even if you do not get what you want, which I'm certain you would become an entirely different creature. It's an experience that I think anybody who is really, really into creating content for their business or for their personal brand should look into. So this is the end of this episode. I hope you gained 1 or 2 things. So follow me every day. I try to produce content around developing your personal brand, of which podcast is a key aspect of it. My brand, my agency Covy, we work with personal brands and business. So I work with entrepreneurs, startup founders to help them build their brand and grow it online. So subscribe to my channel, follow, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.